This is Dateline News and Conversations. My guest tonight is Dr. John Carnogursky. He is a Slovak former politician who served as Prime Minister of Slovakia in 1991 and 1992. He was the former chairman of the Christian Democratic Movement from 1990 to 2000. He is currently chairman of the Slovak-Russian Association in Bratislava. He is a practicing attorney, and he's a dissident. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, I am honored and privileged to have you. You have a fascinating story, a fascinating background that I want to begin with before we talk about some things that are happening in Russia, in Ukraine, in Crimea, and in the world in general. Now, I've done a little bit of research on you, and
yes, you are not the first one.
Yeah, what I read was on August 14th, 1989, before the so-called Velvet Revolution, you were imprisoned and released only after the collapse of the communist regime through a presidential amnesty on November 25th. So it seems you were in prison from August to November. Tell me about that period and what were you doing?
Yes, we have a dissident group in Slovakia, but inside of Czechoslovakia in that time. We wrote a letter to the, I think, government of Slovakia, and we we have called people in Slovakia that they should on 21st of August put flowers in the places where our people were shot by armies of Warsaw Pact in August 68, when Czechoslovakia was occupied by Warsaw Pact armies. Yes, and that was one point that I was then put into prison for. Second was that on the dissidents of Slovakia, we assembled in July 1989 on the one place in Slovakia where was the memorial of General Stefanik. The General Stefanik was, he commanded the Czechoslovak armies in First World War and after, shortly after, because he died in the plane crash in 1919. Yes. And third, we demanded the free elections in Czechoslovakia. That were 3 points for which I was accused and put into prison. Yes, and that was all. I must tell that we were, because the letter on the Slovak government, as I remember, we have been signing 5 of us dissidents, and two of us we were put into prison. They say most serious out of the 5. Miroslav Kusi, he died, and me, and 3 were criminally persecuted on freedom. And yes, and I was when I was put on yes, and the the court the court uh, decided the court was on 23rd of August 89. That means after already after the after the outbreak of Velvet Revolution, and I was liberated, but the prosecutor um, put no, no, he decided, he announced that no, I should not be I should not be liberated, and so the whole court should be prolonged on the higher stage of the court. So that's why I stayed in prison, and but 2 days later the president of Czechoslovakia gave me no, what is the English word for it? So I was
Amnesty,
amnesty,
amnesty.
yes, amnesty, and I was put free. But it was practically 1 week after the outbreak of the Velvet Revolution, and the yes, when I went, because I was put free suddenly. Nobody did know about it. I mean my wife and or my lawyer. So I went by tramway home in Bratislava, and in that time it was in the evening already. But in that time, on practically on all on each second house in Bratislava was written uh, that we demand free elections. That means that at least one point for which I was imprisoned uh, three months earlier, now demanded thousands of people in Bratislava at least. And
Well,
the second, when I was put free, uh, exactly 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, when I left prison, I was sworn in as the first deputy prime minister of Czechoslovakia. Because first I went into Czechoslovakian government, uh, only later to Slovakian government, and yes, so in 2 weeks I had to uh, change my thinking from how to get out of prison to how to govern Czechoslovakia.
wow. That's amazing. Now, I have to ask you because I also read that you were an important figure in the secret church in Slovakia, and you published a magazine. I think some kind of a illegal magazine that was called Bratislava Papers. What
Yes,
what was that all about?
you know, now the in that time was the name for such printings samizdat, from Russian word printing alone. And so in that time we had no computers, and no, we are not able to just to put it something some text or anything else into computer and share it with another people in the whole world, and especially in the whole Czechoslovakia. So we had to type the say free or but forbidden texts on on paper. Yes, I would not explain the technology of printing, and yes, and to deliver it to another people. And we did it, and the so I started with my friends the first semi-religious samizdat, politics and religion. It was in 82 or 83, but later I left it because I was already in that time more, say, politically oriented, not religious. Yes, I'm Catholic till to today, but I did not work, or did not. I wasn't active very much in so-called secret church, but in Slovakia, the so-called secret church was the broadest oppositional dissident movement against communist regime. In Czech part of Czechoslovakia, it was Charter 77, rather say liberal or semi-liberal movement. But in Slovakia, that was so-called secret church. So first, I started, as I told, in semi-religious samizdat newspaper. Later, I left it because it was too religious and less political as I wished. And later, so in 87, in the year 1987, I started with my friend to publish the paper, the samizdat paper, Bratislava papers.
Okay. So was that the Catholic Church at that time that you were talking about?
Once more, what kind of church?
The Catholic, Roman Catholic.
Mostly, but it was not just Roman Catholic. There were Protestant as well, and even some Jewish participated, but mostly Catholic, because Slovakia is mostly Catholic country.
Okay. So I want to ask you now, you actually became the Prime Minister of Slovakia for, I think, a year. How
Yes.
did that happen? Was that a free election? And what did you do during that 1 year that you were the Prime Minister of Slovakia?
That was even the whole time after collapse of communism. It was rather complicated time in all ex-communist countries, because we were living for 40 years in communist dictatorship, and that's why the normal democracy did not exist, normal medias did not exist. And suddenly everything broke out, and that's why it was the time when quite a lot of say populists demanding unreasonable goals appeared. And but they collapsed again and again. And the Christian Democratic Movement, practically Christian Democratic Party, but because the word party was united in the consciousness of people in Czechoslovakia with Communist Party, that's why we have chosen the word Christian Democratic Movement, not party, but practically it was party. And so we were not populistic, but that's why we did not lead the public opinion polls. But when the populistic parties and politicians collapse again and again, the Christian Democratic movement went up, and that's why I became the prime minister, because Christian Democratic movement was the strongest movement or party in Slovakia in that time, and so in that way I was more than 1 year the prime minister of Slovakia, and in that time were very important reforms of the whole society made. For example, the economy. Just say till 89, November 89, where was the economy was communist economy, planned economy, no free market economy, and suddenly the economy started to be market economy, and the people did first, yes, the enterprises that did exist in communist time for decades suddenly had no customers, etc. So the unemployment rise to 25% in Slovakia. Second, in Slovakia was concentrated the the armament industry, the weapons, heavy weapons, tanks, production of tanks and cannons, etc. Yes, because the weapons were aimed as and on fighting against the West, and Slovakia was far away, more far away from the West as say Czech part of Czechoslovakia. That why this industry in Slovakia was more secured, etc., etc. So in that time I took over the government of Slovakia, and for 1 year we made yes, more or less ordinarily the reforms of the society and the economy and the politics in Slovakia.
Wow. So you went through a period just like the Soviet Union when it fell, and Russia after Gorbachev instituted glasnost and perestroika. I mean, you were the one that had to pick up the pieces at the collapse of communism, correct?
Yes, yes. Collapse of communism I lived through in the prison. Because last 3 months of communism I spent in prison, and then suddenly everything was free, even in such free that first half of year I was in the federal government of Czechoslovakia uh, as deputy prime minister, and I was responsible also for security forces, say police, etc. Not army, but security forces. And but the people were thought that yes, now even the policemen that yes, kept order on streets and and traffic, etc., that they were enemies, because they were from communist time. So we had to calm people. No, these policemen are good people, good men, because without them in the streets of our cities would be chaos, etc., etc. And suddenly as I told, the factories lost their customers. So we had as fast as possible to find the new production for factories. So in that time, yes, practically in that time was starting the that from Western Europe car industry uh, mm, had constructed or built factories in Slovakia, and do you know why? Because constructing tanks and constructing cars, practically it is the same. And people who did know, who were able to construct tanks, were able to construct cars as well. So yes, but it took a few years, but that's why now Slovakia is the strongest country in the world, not United States, not Germany. Slovakia, where most cars on the pro man is constructed. I repeat, because here are Volkswagen, Peugeot, and Kia. I do not know all the companies that have started with their factories in Slovakia. So, and that was the time when we had all that to manage somehow.
Wow. Um, that's really amazing. You told me that this wasn't a terribly troubling time, but it was actually a romantic period of time for you.
Yes, yes, it was.
I guess being a dissident, a revolutionary, uh, you were at the forefront of significant change, and I'm sure that was a very romantic and exciting time. Now, you are a Juris Doctor. You have a PhD in law. Uh, and are you still practicing law? And what kind of law did you practice? I understand that you were representing underprivileged people. You were representing people that were accused of crimes, maybe. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? What you did as an attorney?
Yes, mostly I was practicing the civil law and labor law, uh, and that kind of laws, but also criminal law as well, but not very much, because yes, in generally the people and even people watching our show uh, uh, think that criminal law that is most interesting, but criminal law for a lawyer, that means that a lawyer must spend very much time just hearing the yes, people speaking about the crime, something, but not very important, and saying something important about the crime, for example, and about the man who did it, it is just a very low percentage of the whole criminal proceedings. I would say 3 till 5%. So a lawyer must spend very much time hearing just, not very important things. Yes, but of course, this 3 or 5% he may not miss. But in civil law, civil law and civil cases, this unimportant parts of the process are much less. Say, I would say 60-70% of time that the lawyer spend with civil law or labor law is important for the case, and just the rest is not so much important. And in that communist time, especially in the labor law, quite a lot of people were kicked out from the job, because, for example, because teacher were seen by somebody that they were in the church, or that the child was visiting the religion yes,
Classes, catechism, or
yes,
indoctrination.
yes, or the yes, and or said something. For example, he signed the Charter 77, and he was kicked out of the job. Or in the if he was in education or in higher positions, and he did consider the occupation of Czechoslovakia in 68 as a occupation, and not as a brother's help for Czechoslovak people, etc., etc. So this people I represented legally, and for or even again for even for in criminal cases, and for representing in such a criminal case in today's Czech Republic. I was kicked out from the bar in the year 81. I represented a young woman, and she retyped the works of Czech and Slovak writers who were kicked out from the not communist, but from the official association of writers. And in the communist time, only writers who were members in the official association of writers were able to publish, and their work were published in the newspapers, even in the book, etc. So, and yes, and one such a young lady, she was from the police. Police did recognize that she is rewriting, a criminal case had started against her, and she has chosen me as her lawyer. And because I made that as I thought I should do it, and that was by the law and Czechoslovakian and international law, that was prescribed, or yeah, yes. So I did it that way, and for my representing her, I was kicked off from the bar in the year 81. And by the way, the American Bar Association had in that year, sometime in the middle of the 81 first year, regular session, as I remember, in California, and sent a letter to Czechoslovakian President Gustav Husak, communist president, in yes, in recognizing me, or asking him that I should be put again into Bar Association of Czechoslovakia. By the way, again, when I was put into prison, it was, yes, in August 89, and in September 89 took place regular General Assembly of United Nations in New York. And in that time, the American foreign secretary or state secretary was Baker. And James Baker, during a break in the General Assembly, asked then Czechoslovakian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Kňoupek, that I should be put free from the prison. So you see that I had quite good relations with American association or associations at league and even government.
Well, that's really amazing, because later I read that you became you were the head of the Ministry of Justice. Is that right?
Yes, but it was in 1998 till 2002, 4 years.
Wow. So how things changed for you as a lawyer, from being disbarred to having the Americans advocate for you to be reinstated, and then you rising to the very top of the Ministry of Justice.
You know,
That's
it was still end of 90s. It was still the time of confronting various political forces in Czechoslovakia as well, but in former East European countries as well, and so we created a coalition of parties for elections in '98. It was Czechoslovakia had split in that time, and it was already the Slovak Republic and Czech Republic, and yes, and yes, Christian Democratic Movement was still, say, important part of this coalition, and I became Minister of Justice, and just to as the time were changing. It was I became the Minister of Justice in September 89, and in March 99, you know, NATO planes and United States planes started to bomb Yugoslavia. And in that time, the American American ambassador in Slovakia asked Slovakian government to allow the American military planes from Belgium to fly to over Yugoslavia to bomb Yugoslavia, but needed of course the permission of Slovakia. That means Slovak government, because west from Slovakia is neutral Austria and then Switzerland, so it was not possible, and only practically only Slovakia. And I was so it was an special session of the Slovak government deciding just this question, and I voted. I voted. I did not vote for allowing American planes to fly over Yugoslavia. It was already another time when James Baker asked for putting me on freedom.
What an amazing career! What an amazing life, which you call romantic, and I guess I would have to agree with you. All right, I want to switch to another subject now. Your background, your life has been absolutely fascinating. You've been involved in historic events of seismic proportions, but you are currently the chairman of the Slovak-Russian Association in Bratislava. And you're also the chairman of our coordinating board of the Friends of Crimea. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first of all, tell me about the Slovak-Russian Association, and when was that formed, and why, and what is it all about?
Yes, you know, when I was dissident in communist Czechoslovakia, of course, it was partly dissident against Soviet Union, but especially dissident against communist regime. I did not believe in communism. I did consider the communism as a bad social system, and I did see it this badness of communism on in my everyday life in Slovakia. So that's why in that time I was against, partly against Soviet Union as the main communist country, but after Gorbachev reforms, etc., the today and split of Soviet Union, the today's Russia is not a communist country. The Communist Party of Russia is the main oppositional party against Putin. So, and in all time, even in communist time, more or less, I recognized historic Russia as and Russian culture and Russian politics in European history in a long time, in centuries, as a good one that helped European history to go up. So when communism in Russia, in Soviet Union, or say in Russia, collapsed, I was not even not against Russia, not in a slightest way, and just oppositionally, I was able to recognize Russia as this historic Russia that, of course, that had many faults, as each country has, and but many good aspects. And because in communist Czechoslovakia, there did exist, say, pro-Soviet association, but that association collapsed very shortly after collapse of communism, because that association was built or constructed on the model of communist regimes. That means that everything was in on the top, and the top decided about everything down. And now, but the Friends of Russia in Slovakia were, yes, among ordinary people, and quite a lot of them. And the challenge was to organize these people who loved Russia, and to let them recognize each other. So I created in 2006, in the year 2006, I and a few friends, we have created Slovak-Russian Association, and that is working till today, and that is created on from below, from below. That means that when where in Slovakia a few people who would like to join Slovak-Russian Association appear, then we let them know about each other, and they join Slovak-Russian Association, and they create so-called clubs. Arbat. Arbat is yes, the name is taken from this street in Moscow, a street where streets artists yes uh, are showing their art, like Greenwich Village in New York, or other streets in the western cities. And these clubs that are more parts of Slovak-Russian Association, but the sessions of the clubs may attend also people who are not members of the association, but like to participate on this session. And this session are created on the model of French Café Philosophique. If you did hear about it, in France exists a long time. Café Philosophique, where in cafes on some day in the week meet people and discuss philosophic questions. Yes, and we as well. We meet in some cafe in some day in the week, and discuss not philosophic questions, but questions usually related to Russia, but needn't be just to Russia. And in this time, our association has over 900 of members, and is practically is united with Friends of Crimea, because yes, we all members of Russia's association are also Friends of Crimea. Crimea is part of Russia now as well.
So Jan, I are you the founder of Friends of Crimea as well?
In yes, yes, in this sense, yes, but it is not that just me. I have spoken to some friends of mine, and yes, sharing the idea of, say, creating first Slovak-Russian Association, then idea of Friends of Crimea clubs, and we did it.
So you said you have some 900 members in the Slovak-Russian Association,
Yes,
and most of these are part of Friends of Crimea as well.
yes, yes.
Wow. And so what kind of activities are you being involved in? Are you just regular meetings where you discuss issues that are happening in Russia and the world, or are they involved? Are they involved
Mostly.
in advocacy? And so, tell me a little bit more about the focus and the mission of Friends of Crimea in Slovakia.
Mostly, there are at present time there are 13 clubs. These clubs, Arbat clubs, and clubs of Friends of Crimea in Slovakia, uh, because in as in all associations, there are more active members and less active members, and of course, not all members of, say, Slovak Russian associations do participate or do take part on the sessions of the on the not sessions on the meetings of these Arbat clubs, but and first and they know that yes, the meetings are in that and that cafe, and on that and that day of the week. In some towns, not each week, but not only or 2 weeks or just maybe 1 month even, because in small cities, towns in of Slovakia, there is not yes, not so many people who are able and will wish to meet, say, for example, each week. And I usually, I've told it even to my Russian friends that the uh, tone or the discussions on even on Russians topics on this in these Arbat clubs are more pro-Russian than discussions in general cafes in Moscow or St. Petersburg, etc. Because, of course, we are just um, speaking in favor of Russia, even in this conflict with Ukraine.
So, have many of these people traveled to Russia and Crimea? Members of either the
Not
Slovak,
at present, not very many, because first to get Russian visa is not so easy,
yeah,
and to travel is also not so easy, because from Slovakia, for example, yes, in last year I was 4 times in Russia, but each time on some type of conference, and I had to fly from Vienna airport because it's close to Bratislava, through Istanbul, Turkey, to Moscow, and even once I fled from Vienna through Cairo, Egypt, to Moscow. So you see that it is not so easy to travel, and that's why just a few of us are traveling now, if starting from this COVID time, and even now because of the war.
Yeah. So you mentioned that most of you, I guess, or a lot of you, are pro-Russian. I want to ask you now about the war in Ukraine. I call it a war. The Russians are still calling it a special, well, official Russian special military operation.
Okay.
Was Vladimir Putin justified, and was he not provoked into starting this special military operation? In the United States of America, the propaganda has been consistently, constantly in the last year, since the special military operation, is they are saying that Vladimir Putin was unprovoked in this brutal invasion of Ukraine. What's your opinion on that?
I think yes, Putin was justified to start operation, but operation or war doesn't matter for me and for us discussing the matter, because first it started with going eastward NATO. And when Americans, I think George Bush Senior and Germans promised to Gorbachev that NATO would not go to the east, but it went. And then not only NATO going eastward, but on Ukraine, United States started to construct the bases. And the military importance of Ukraine for Russia is more or less the same as military importance of Cuba for the United States. And when in 1962 the Soviet Union, Russians, located their missiles on Cuba, United States were able to start even the World War just to get the missiles away. And when the United States started to build their base in Ochakovo, close to Odessa, in the year 2019, as I know, and that means that permission to construct it and the plans had to be made even earlier. And if the base Ochakovo had been finished, then missiles from Ochakovo to Moscow would need 6-7 minutes. And Moscow is 15 million people city. So even if not all missiles would reach Moscow, because some could be shot down, but even if one would reach Moscow, then at least 1 million of dead people would be the result. And if Ochakovo would be finished, then next American bases would follow. And that's why I think that President Putin was obliged to start to start operation again, because yes, in December 21 he asked President Biden that Ukraine would not be used for military infrastructure of NATO or United States, at some another demands, but that was the main. And President Biden and NATO had refused it. So what another solution had President Putin? And as president, he was elected by the people of Russian Federation even to protect them. And so it was his obligation to protect people of Russia, because otherwise they could be uh, yes, in the danger of American missiles.
Yeah, well, I have been documenting the reckless, consistent provocations of the United States, and it is the United States behind all of this. And the provocations that you mentioned, we could add to that, especially the coup d'état in 2014, which the United States organized, funded, promoted, with Vice President then Joe Biden behind it all. And then Russia was betrayed by Germany and France, Merkel and Hollande, with the Minsk agreements, which was a scam to give Ukraine an opportunity, and NATO to give Ukraine the time and opportunity to build up its military forces for an attack on the Donbass, and that all became public last year. And so when the United States and people say that this was unprovoked, it is just cannot be substantiated with the facts that you have listed and I've mentioned. And they even go back to World War II, when Harry Truman dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was not to end the war, because Japan was already wanting to have peace. It was to warn Stalin, the Soviet Union, that America was the boss. And so it's important for people, I think, to understand the historical context of all of this. Now, I want to ask you one last question before we finish. What was your interpretation of the meeting that happened last month when President Xi came to Moscow and met with Putin? People are talking about seismic changes. What is your interpretation of that meeting and its significance?
It was the revanche to the United States, and especially to the bad politics of President Biden, because the politics of the West, and yes, in last years, especially of President Biden, pushed China and Russia together, and even, oh yes, very important American politologists like Henry Kissinger and even before asked American politics not to unite China and Russia, and that occurred. And the visit of Xi, first, that the visit of President Xi, the result of the visit was that the relations between China and Russia that had been before the visit, yes, matter of fact, now became even official in treaties signed by Xi and Putin. They both countries recognize each other as as partners, special importance. The word I don't remember, and military cooperation between both countries and another. And you know, even maybe during the visit of Xi in Moscow, and from purely from the treaties that were signed in Moscow, it may not be so clear for average people in the world. But very shortly after the visit, maybe about 1 week after the visit of Xi in Moscow, the Russian President Putin signed the new conception of Russian foreign policy. And this new conception of Russian foreign policy is more radical against the West than was the previous one, or say that was the Russian policy prior to Xi visits in Moscow. And in this new conception of foreign policy, Russia, Russia for Russia, or is written that the West is the even enemy, maybe not enemy, but in that time, that kind of countries against Russia, and even against the United States. The United States are appointed as direct opponent of Russia, and in the again maybe a week after Xi's visit in Moscow, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia repeated the demands of Russia on Ukraine, and he not only repeated the demands that were put by Putin on the beginning, but added even that Ukraine may not join the European Union. So it means this more radical demands of Russia on the West means that during the visit, Xi and Putin did reach a common language, and I mean that the uh, uh, checking of this visit and the treaties that were reached by both statesmen is Ukraine. The if Russia has got more radical after Xi visits than before, that means that this stronger radicalism of Russia must be shown in Ukraine, and that we will see in very short time.
Well, Jan, I want to thank you very much for this very fascinating and interesting conversation with you. You are the chairman of our coordinating committee of Friends of Crimea. So we have had the opportunity to spend time together. We are working together to promote not just Crimea, but Russia, the Russian Federation, in a positive light to the United States and the rest of the world. And I think that this is a very important mission and focus that we share. So I can't thank you enough, and I hope to see you again, Jan.
Yes, thank you as well, and I hope we will see each other somewhere in Russia or even on Crimea.